My name is Christophe Roudifort. I'm a professor at Laval University in Quebec City in the Department of Management and Business Administration. And I've been developing an expertise in the field of crisis management and communication for 30 years now. And I've also been consulting with different companies in crisis situations for 25 years now. There are a lot of differences between before and after the pandemics. This crisis, by definition, is very unprecedented. And not because it's a pandemic, because we've already had some pandemic in the past, but mostly because for the first time in our lives, for most of us, we have been asked to stay home. And staying home for 2 or 3 months is not a neutral experience at all. And this lockdown I think, has had a lot of consequences on people. Of course, we're talking a lot about consequences and mental illness, but I think there are also some positive aspects about that. Among these aspects, being in such a kind of introspection period favors to some extent the development of new ideas, is a source of innovation because we have more time. We have more time to think. We have more time to think about our company. We have more time to think about the future of our companies. And I think it's a real source of potential innovation for the future. And one of my advice for managers precisely is to be able to capitalize on these people who really took advantage of this lockdown to introspect to some extent and to think about different things about their own organization, their own jobs. And I think this is a very fruitful reservoir of ideas for the organization in the future. What is important is that this slowing down of the world and the economy, to some extent, has favored a kind of renewal of the thinking about the organization, about the strategy of the organization. And before the lockdown, maybe we had no time to think about that because we had some urgencies to manage, we had some priorities to meet. And during the lockdown, there was a kind of reversal between urgency and importance. And because we went through this slowing down, it gave people time precisely to revisit their objectives, to revisit maybe their strategy. And I have an example, for example, of one manager in Montreal with whom I'm working with. And with him and with her, actually, we completely rejuvenate first the strategy of our organization because she had time. And we all have this kind of dream to have some more time in our lives, even in our professional lives. And the lockdown, from that point of view, was an opportunity. Actually, the most important challenge in terms of communication and crisis communication is the period and the level of uncertainty that we're facing. And of course, during the lockdown, we went through a lot of uncertainties, but we still are in a very uncertain environment and uncertain perspectives about what is going to happen. In terms of crisis management, what we usually do to deal with such level of uncertainties is not, of course, to anticipate what is going to happen, because it's almost impossible today. And I think that most organizations just do not know where they are going now. So you have to be honest, you have to be transparent. You don't have to pretend that you know where you're going, you're going now. And the best thing to communicate and even to manage upcoming events in the upcoming weeks and months is to work on what we call scenarios. And one of the best strategy in terms of crisis management and crisis communication towards employees would be to think about 3 alternative scenarios. what we call the best case scenario, where I would say the pandemic is done forever to some extent. A worst case scenario where we're talking about a new lockdown in the coming weeks, coming month, and maybe what we call a reasonable scenario, an in-between scenario, where of course we're not really sure about the potential of a new lockdown, but still we are keeping a little bit more reasonable and try to go ahead as if things would go away, and as if the pandemic would be over. We need to make sure that for each of these scenarios, we have some key messages that we are able to communicate to employees. And you have to be very clear about the fact that you still don't know, but that you are working on alternative positions, alternative strategies based on these scenarios. And it's a way, to some extent, to reduce a little more the level of uncertainty. It's not a way to avoid uncertainty. It's a way to reduce the level of uncertainty and to make things clear, to make it clear that we have envisioned different options. Now we have time to anticipate. And it was not the case 3 months ago. It was very sudden. We could not anticipate anything. We have to send people back to work, back home, sorry. But now we cannot afford not to anticipate. And the best way to anticipate when time is very uncertain is precisely to work on alternative scenarios about the future and different strategies that we would implement depending on these scenarios. I would say give your people, give your employees, give your colleagues time to exchange on the experience they've had together. We've had a common experience, which was the lockdown. We've gone through this lockdown, as I told you, being to some extent at home during three months has a lot of influence on ourselves, a lot of influence on our psychology, on our ideas, and so on and so forth. And I think that the best advice I would give to managers would be, okay, give them some time to make sure that they recreate a link together. They recreate new relations together because they've been isolated for a long time. Maybe they have some new ideas. Maybe they have individually revisited their priorities and they need to know exactly where they are. The best way to help everybody to know exactly where they are is to precisely organize a little bit these exchanges in order to make things clear about where we're going together.